recording. There we go. And so that's the agenda, simple and easy. But before we actually start, and here are today's speakers, so Alison Belking will be leading this, and John Pastanza and Sarah Schenker are also the program chairs for this year, and they'll be going through the session with us. I just wanted to ask you actually where you're from. So here, using this poll everywhere, if you have attended other seminar series, you're familiar with that, you can scan this code or just add pollf.com/sdspolls877 in Chrome or any other browser, and then you'll be able to add where you're from. So we would love to hear where you're from. I'll give you a minute to just scan this or go to this website, and usually we have lots of people from many places, so we want to know how that is going today as well. And this will be the link that we'll be using for the Q&A. So if you're familiar with this, then later on it becomes very easy to add your questions as well. So I'll change this. Lots of places. There's a Korea, Netherlands, Richmond.
I can't grow fish.
Sorry. Awesome. Lots of places. Thanks for joining. This is amazing. Some more. Arabia. That's just awesome. Thank you for joining. And I'll let Alison now actually take over, and then we'll go through the content here. And I just lost my Zoom. If you want to take over, Alison. There.
Okay. Where's mine? There it is. All right. Well, welcome everybody. It's nice to have you here. Now I'm looking everywhere. Move this up here so I can kind of see. We're glad to have you here. And John and Sarah and I are really excited to be program chairs this year. And reviewing is a critical point of the whole process. John, Sarah, and I have been thread chairs quite a few times and have been very reliant upon your reviews and love it when we get really good ones. So now as program chairs, this is going to even be more important to us as we're trying to put together a program. So, and John and Sarah, jump in anytime, please. So we're going to go through why review, what your reviewing preferences might be, sort of the process of review, review components, and examples. All right. Okay, there we go. So why review? Authors need feedback. I mean, if any of us who've written anything, I mean, one of the most best things I ever had was to get a paper back. This was just a submitted paper to a journal of a PhD student who I'd argued with over and over again about things, and it came back just inked up. And she was mortified, and I was thrilled because this is a way to understand how your discipline operates. And so feedback is important. The type of feedback that you give is really important. It's good for us as reviewers to really think deeply about what somebody else's work is doing. It also helps you expand the author's scope. If maybe they've missed, wow, you really need to read all of these people because they could really help your work. It's going to sort of increase the awareness of the work for the author, for us, and for those attending the conferences. And again, it really helps with program placement. We try hard to put papers in sessions that can feed upon one another, and it's especially good for authors then to be in sessions with other authors doing similar work that maybe they don't know, and now they will. So this is a good way of us building community as well. So for your reviewing preferences, this is in the web portal.systemdynamics.org. You want to go in there and adjust your reviewing preferences if you want to. When you click on reviewing preferences, you then come up to a page that looks like this. And you can check how many papers you want to review. You can, the types that you would like to review. Do you want to just do work in progress? If you don't have that much time, maybe those are better because they're shorter. If you really want to get into the depths of stuff, get into a research paper submissions, and you don't have to stay within your own discipline. And I've often found sort of stretching myself a little bit out has been really interesting, and I've learned a lot and perhaps been able to bring my worldview and how I think about things to other disciplines. So I think spreading yourself out is often good. Don't just feel because, like me, you only do environment and resources, but those things impact everything else. So it's a good place to stretch yourself. And then you want to click and record your preferences. So maximum number of submissions. Oh, we have these pop-ups. Again, check the submission formats and check all the threads you're wanting to submit for. So our process is started. So papers have been submitted. You can get in there right now and start reviewing. You've got, you should take about 2 weeks if you can to review a paper, or, not push it out too long. A lot of times we end up with a lot of reviews coming in right around March 21st. And it's nice for thread chairs and program chairs to actually be able to get in there early. So the earlier you can get in there, the better for your thread and program chairs who are trying to make work of a lot of papers. So some threads, the environment thread has had 60, 70 papers in it in the past, and it took a while to get through them all. So having these done earlier is actually good for the thread chairs. So types of comments that you can put in. So you're going to be seeing, this has changed a little bit this year, a place for you to comment. And we wanted you to comment first before doing those little drop-down boxes that we've done before. Research papers, the review length should be about 500 words. Practitioner applications, maybe about 250, same with work in progress. Again, these are suggestions, but we want you to really summarize the contribution of the submission, include, strong comments about, was the content good? Are they missing something? What really needs improvement? Or other thoughts or ideas for the authors. This is going to be shown to the authors. And what you're trying to do here is help them be better authors, help them be better modelers, help them think about something from a little different perspective, but obviously done in a professional and courteous and encouraging way. You can pipe in if anybody has questions as we go. This ranking that used to be at the top of the page, for those of you who have done this before, is trying to give your thread chairs and the program chairs sort of a quick look at where is this paper sort of in the realm of things. This is not shown to authors. This is just for your thread chairs and program chairs. And so you'll have a problem statement that have the authors clearly identified a problem to address. And sometimes this isn't that clear. And maybe it's somebody who's very early on in a project and they haven't identified it really well yet. But you still want to sort of say, it's not quite there yet. And maybe in your comments, you would say something to that effect. You need to really focus in on your problem statement. Are there methodological approach? Are they clear? Did they say we have done this, this, and this for addressing this problem? Presentations of results. We want to see clear, strong results that represent, what is the most important part of their work. And if it's a contribution and it's really, really interesting, we really want to know if this is a strong, if it's poor, if it's an original contribution, really cool things that change over time. And you're going, wow, these people are really cutting edge here. Really point these things out, because papers like that end up in parallels and plenaries. So again, you can also put in program committee notes. And so that this is something, again, if you're finding this mind-blowing paper, put it in there and we will see it and we'll go, oh, this is one maybe we should elevate. You don't have to do this if you don't want it. If you're a thread chair, sometimes these are really helpful as well, that if you want the program committee to know something, that please let us know in there. And this really helps us with paper placement and understanding whether it should be in the plenary, for example. So the best review I've ever gotten, one was for my PhD student, but it wasn't to the System Dynamics conference. I think one of the early on, when I was just joining the field, I got some comments back that really made me feel like, okay, I'm on the right track. And this is when I was still a grad student. And, you know, of course, my advisor says, you're great, you're fine. And I'm like, okay, but you like me, you're my advisor. And when I got a review back that was very encouraging and spoke to the fact that somebody had carefully read my work, it really changed my whole perspective on the fact that, yes, I belong here and I'm actually doing work that is worthy of this society. So John or Sarah, do you have, I jump in here, your best review you've ever gotten? And why?
Well, I think similar to your example, I remember my, I think my third or second conference in Korea, where I got very interesting mixed reviews, but one was extremely interesting. And then the reviewer came to my presentation and personally talked to me about the work and then where she thinks I can improve. And I think that was extremely helpful. So I think when you find papers that you believe you can give positive feedback and probably talk to the person that wrote the paper to basically give him or her some advice about how they can improve, I think that is very important. And I found that interaction with the reviewer extremely helpful. So I think some of these things, the way you put the reviews are extremely important so that people will see, even though you are basically trying to direct them, you try to put them in a positive frame that they might look at it and try to contact you or basically look at the review and try to work on it to help them improve. So I think that, in my opinion, was quite helpful.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you here. I guess in terms of my most favorite review that I've ever received, well, first of all, I think the fact that we even receive extensive reviews from the System Dynamics Conference is kind of a cool thing. I know other conferences do this, but to Allison's point, the fact that it's other experts in system dynamics helping you improve your work, I think there's something very special about that you wouldn't receive in maybe either a journal or another conference that doesn't have the deep methodological understanding of system dynamics. So I think just in general, having others review your work is great. In terms of other things that people have done to review my work that have been helpful, you know, a lot of like the content areas where maybe, you know, we're adding all this background information that might kind of be our space, but not. When people have actually cited, like, have you looked at this work, or have you looked at this place, or look at this particular paper for an example of, you know, how to lay out this argument. I think that's been really helpful for me because it's very constructive. But you know, in general, to echo what Allison was saying too, is I think having someone kind of retort back what your paper was about too, just makes it seem like they actually read it as well. Sometimes it feels like the reviewers aren't really reading your whole paper, and then they're giving you feedback that doesn't actually apply.
Yeah, I guess one other thing I would put in here, if this is like the first year you've ever reviewed, and you get into a paper that you feel like is way over your head, I just say, like I say to my students, if you've got to read that first paragraph 10 times, it's not you. And so you might say, you could clarify this, I may be new to the field, but it would help me if you could articulate this to a more broad audience or something like that. So there's different ways of approaching this, and I think it's really important not to be intimidated by the review process. I know I was terrified the first few times, but don't be. It's a good learning experience for everybody. Oh, now I'm not. Come on. So we're going to give you some examples and key things to be important about being courteous and motivating. So we're trying to help people do better work. You want to give a quick summarization of the paper. This is to help the thread chairs and the program chairs, and to be able to go back. You know, we've read everything, but trying to keep things straight in our minds to be able to go back and look, oh yes, that was what this one was about. Respectful questioning, you know, like, I don't quite understand what you did here, but could you, you know, maybe you might want to expand this in your presentation, and any suggestions you might have. If it's a paper that you think could really benefit from additional resources, like somebody really missed a line of research, this could be very, very useful for them. You just want to do it in such a way that it's motivating for them. Wow, you should go look at this kind of stuff or these people's work. So we highlighted these. So trying to be courteous and motivated here in green, thank you for a well-structured paper on a relevant topic. It's like, you're telling them right there, they wrote it well, and it is relevant. Down on the bottom, this person said, I enjoyed reading this paper, and I hope my comments are helpful in further improving how your work is reported, and would look forward to reading about this, its impact in due time. So these are encouraging things, and sort of bookending this is a really good idea. Again, this is talking about sort of the summary of the paper, that your paper clearly shows homelessness is a relevant and complex problem. Your model structure described, sorry, I got too many things on my screen. Model structure is described in a form of a list of a major model assumptions. So we want to know these assumptions, which is good. And then just saying it could be strengthened by describing the feedback structure. This is often, in newer papers, we're not getting clear, perhaps, descriptions of feedback structures. Parameter values that could not be derived from data are estimated on the basis of a historical time series. And I would have liked to have seen more on consequences of that assumption. So trying to help somebody really think more deeply about their work and being very clear and concise about this. Again, thinking about this as a research paper. So this might be, if it's a new person, it might be, a chapter of their dissertation that they could use some help with. So again, trying to think this through in a very encouraging way. So the reviews for other papers, might look a little different. Again, this is thinking about a research paper, so it's a little longer, it's more in depth, you have more information. So it describes an interesting and useful area of work, and then the description of the paper, it describes a good approach to coding the material and presents some interesting analysis of the material gathered during both during and post workshop. So this one is trying to improve the paper. The discussion and conclusion sections could have been used further to draw out the implications of system dynamics. Are you suggesting a framework for understanding such microanalyses? Are there particular conclusions that can be taken from the specific examples put forward to the general community? And then suggesting some other stuff that they might look at. So if it's in your area of expertise, and here, this isn't SD, but it might be really helpful for other parts of their paper. A work in progress, again, you're going to have much less, basically a page. And so you're going to have to sort of make a little more, assumption about where this is going. And again, it is a work in progress, so it may not be that complete. So this encouraging part, trying to summarize the paper for it opens with the summarizing. The paper is a work in progress submission that examples the issues of home purchasing decisions in 2 regions. And talking a little bit more about encouraging them. It should be of interest to conference participants and could be generalizable to many regions. And again, I understand this is a work in progress submission, and it seems as though you've done a lot of work and are experts in the area of content. And it's difficult to do. So they're wrapping that up after your paper will be strengthened by, for example, outlining historical homeownership rates, et cetera. And this also might help the author get past the work in progress to the next step that they're going. Another place that if you have other literature that you might point them to, it's a good place to do it. Practitioner applications, you're going to be looking at a slide deck. And so you're going to have to think about it a little bit differently. Hopefully there's enough in the slide deck that you can really understand the whole genesis of the thought, the process, and the conclusions that these people have made. Again, trying to summarize a presentation describes a modeling framework called SAVVY. The slides present research questions. Again, however, the rest of the presentation doesn't answer these since it mainly contains slide describing the number of applicants. So this is sort of doing both in the same sentence, but trying to make sure that you can gain everything you can off the slides that you might need. The savvy process presented in a set of steps similar to those used in systems methods, but the presentation perhaps doesn't describe how these steps were used in an application. And then provide a recommendation to help them focus this presentation so that it's more understandable. Again, these can be a little bit tricky just because you don't have the narrative. And I've appreciated in some of the ones that I've reviewed, seeing the presenter's notes in the bottom. That's like, oh, okay. So I've just got this picture that this is what this person's going to talk about. So they can be a little bit tougher to review, in my opinion. Let's see. Yes, unhelpful reviews. This is what it's about, period. They're not that helpful. And maybe this is a summary that the thread share could use, but do they know if it's system dynamics? Do they know if there's a good problem statement, et cetera? So, and for an author, they're not going to get anything from this. No specific stuff. I prefer to see abstracts after titles. You're telling them how to lay out a paper or something like that. Maybe the literature work is not sufficient, and that could perhaps be expanded by, you miss all of these people who are doing work like this. You should be citing them. There is no proper conclusion. So a better way of doing this would add suggestions. Please include this in your conclusion, or you should be looking at this base of literature. You don't want to threaten or attack anybody, for sure. It's just not nice. It needs to be rewritten. But this is just sort of not helpful. And I remember a review I had that the English was a real struggle to get through. And I tried to just be very cordial about that, and suggesting get an English first language person to help you, and then made suggestions about perhaps maybe a better way of laying out your results or something like that. But again, try to be helpful rather than, in this case, a bit rude. Yeah, this is another thing that's not terribly helpful. A lot of authors are doing things with significant mapping, and some people really think that it should be, a simulating model that's being explained. But especially think about a work in progress where somebody is just trying to get their brain wrapped around a problem. I think you might see more of these, or it might have been a stakeholder workshop where they were mapping with stakeholders, and this was enough to help them understand the problem that the stakeholders were dealing with. So again, just saying, I'm not sure the authors understand the requirements of serious mapping and modeling. Causal loop diagramming is rarely definitive by itself. So it can be, and when you get into this point, if the paper is so discombobulated that it's hard to be constructive, try to be as constructive as possible to help this person become better, and put some notes in for the program chairs that this paper's really all over the place and needs a lot of help. And we can do what we can to get those papers into feedback sessions and have somebody get the author some really substantial help. All right.
I think just to add to the last slide, I think we should, if somebody submits a paper that is basically qualitative SD or CLD, causal loop diagramming, and it's a complete paper, I think the comment about you have to add modeling is not going to be very helpful, right? So it is important for us to also recognize that somebody can submit a paper basically based on causal loop diagramming, and the way the person explains and the insight generated from that is very important, and that should be seen as a complete paper in itself. So I think people, if you are always expecting a simulation model, there are papers that might be basically qualitative, and we should look at it as a complete paper and look at it in terms of its merit and its contribution to whatever they're submitting for the conference.
Agreed.
Thanks, Edison. Thanks also for the addendum there, John. We actually don't have any questions at this point in the poll everywhere. Not sure if somebody wants to maybe just unmute yourself and ask something if something is not clear. If you, yes, Osman, please.
Yes,
Go.
thank you very much. I was a reviewer until a few years ago, and this is an excellent refresher. Thank you, Alison and team. I have two questions. I am submitting a paper with another friend of mine. And so do I still qualify as a reviewer? I have already offered to review in business and strategy and a couple other areas. Is there a conflict of interest? How do we prevent that? That's my first question.
I would say no.
But you don't review your own paper. You have to let somebody else review it. And then when it comes to if you come to your thread, then when you are assigning the papers, you have to make sure that the other members in your thread are going to work on it. So you don't review your paper, and you don't also schedule your own paper. You allow others in your group to make the decision on that.
Good, thanks.
Bob, you want to add something?
I was just going to say, we never ever assign someone to review their own paper. So absolutely, yes, review as much as you can. You will not get your own paper. That's guaranteed.
Yes.
Good, thanks, Bob. Thanks, John. My second question is that sometimes there is a leap of faith between the presented model, the stock flow diagram, and the results. At that point in time, do we need to go back to the author suggesting that, explanation of the simulation be provided, or take it for granted that, it is honest, trustworthy work?
Boy, that's a great question. For me, I think as a thread share, I look carefully at the reviews and also tried to understand, if I knew it was somebody who I had pretty much confidence in that they did good work. I mean, the society is not huge, so that sometimes we just know people and we're like, yes, we know they're doing legitimate work. If it's somebody I'm really not familiar with, I do look hard at those at the reviews to try to help me understand. But hopefully the papers explained it through this feedback has created this behavior, and that it's clear enough. If it's really murky, that would certainly be something to get back to the authors on, and to put a note in for your thread chairs, program chairs.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think if you are very suspicious that, of course, first, if they are submit or showing simulation results, you expect to see the model structure that produced that, right? So if you, based on your experience, the model structure can produce the behavior they are showing, I think that is something that you have to make it clear in the presentation, that based on your experience, you don't believe that the model structure can produce that behavior. And then other members in the review team will look at it and possibly agree with you or have different opinion. But I think, Bob, we suggest that people can submit their models, but often not many people do that.
That's true. Many people can submit their models, but Usman, you make a fantastic point. If they have not made it clear how the structure relates to behavior and what they present, they need to present it more clearly, or they could be lying. But I would give them the benefit of the doubt on that part. And that's a comment to the author. You need to present this more clearly.
Yeah.
So that's a fabulous feedback to give to them.
Okay.
Hello, can you hear me? Can I ask
Yes.
a question here?
Sure.
Yeah, I'm just gonna try to present. So let's say the paper is in the middle box. That's the content. I'm looking, me as a reviewer, I'm coming from the end. I'm kind of giving feedback. Okay. I don't know if I missed it where the I'm trying to find out what is the input or the requirements or the requests for the content that I'm reviewing. What was asked from the author? What were the inputs to the other? So I see, maybe I can understand if he's within track or focused, or you understand my question? Are these papers just open-ended, or are they just categorized, or is there any narrow requirements to them before they are submitted or created?
we do offer in the submission guidelines, pretty specific things that we're expecting to see in these submissions. Is
Okay.
that what you're asking?
Yeah, okay, so that's good. So there is that. That is a good point for the reviewer to know about, right?
Yes. And
Okay.
I think, yeah, Raquel's bringing this up so that you can look at these and find out what we've asked. And then if you're completely missing it, you can refer them back to the submission types.
That's good. Thank you.
That's a great question in regard to even the slide submissions that you mentioned, Allison. I know when we first started allowing people to just submit their slides and not a paper, I think folks were reviewing it as though it was incomplete or if something was missing. But the requirements are different. And so to that point of, making sure that you know what the submission type is, the requirements, and then reviewing it's super helpful.
We have one more question here in the Q&A poll. Edison.
So will my reviews be incomplete if I focus on the contribution to theory of practice and the relevance of the idea, but not too much on the modeling? I don't know if we would judge it incomplete. I think if you focus on the contribution to theory and practice, it's going to be very, very helpful. If you don't feel like your strength is in the modeling, perhaps another reviewer will be a strong modeler. And you could put this into the program share notes and just say, I'm looking at it from this perspective, but somebody should check the model.
Thank you for all your questions. This is super helpful. Do we have others?
Or other words of wisdom? If you've been a reviewer, and what challenges or what was your best review and why?
Sarah says start early.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, it just piles up. So starting early, giving yourself enough time so you're not just rushing through their paper and kind of reading it, but not really reading it. I think that's kind of just good reviewer advice. And then I've experienced the other end where I've been reviewed by someone who was kind of cranky that day. And so just know that, it does make an impact on the person who's receiving your comments. So try to take a positive tone. I think you've said that multiple times, Allison, but just reiterating that.
And we do, again, we have feedback sessions if somebody is really, really struggling. And those are typically done by experienced practitioners who sit down and really go through the paper and then offer the person sort of a guide on how to get it into a state that would be accepted for the conference. So we try very hard to be positive, not just say, you're rejected. Unless you're clearly
and secondly, are we supposed to say this is rejected or we are supposed to give comment? I think we are supposed to give comment and not pass judgment on whether it is accepted or rejected, right? Bob or Billy, am I right?
Correct. Yeah. So big part where the reviewers are most helpful. And again, I'm not the program chair, I'm just the thread chair. But at least the thread chair level, we make recommendations as to what the placement is based upon what you as the reviewers tell us and what we as the thread chair see when we read. But ultimately, those judgment decisions come to the program team, which have been talking to you today. And then for me, I don't know, I guess I've been reviewing for a while and thread chair for a while. What I like to see in a review is the first sentence have some form of a compliment in it. Find something nice to say. The next 2 to 3 sentences I try and have be a very concise summary of how I view the paper. So it wouldn't necessarily be a summary that I would get if I was reading cliff notes of the paper, but what is it that I see in that paper? How does that paper resonate with me? And then from there, I tend to offer criticism related to kind of how I perceive the paper, which I try and acknowledge when it's really off the walls, why it might be different than the way that the author saw the paper. And then I always try to, again, end on something nice so that when the reader is done, when the author is done reading the review, they're not left with a really bad taste in their mouth. Because at least from my perspective as a thread chair, one of the strongest things that you, the reviewers, are doing is making sure that authors are getting good, solid, strong feedback. And that's a really hard job to do. And it's one that if the reviewers don't do, then it kind of becomes our problem at either the thread chair or the program chair level. And then for us to go in and make hundreds of reviews obviously takes, or tens of reviews even, takes lots and lots of time. Because the hope is that there's three reviewers assigned to each paper, and that at least one of those 3 reviews will be a really nice, solid, constructive, useful review.
Thanks, Billy. And I think to emphasize a bit, for individuals who are basically new to the conference or submitting for the first time, that is where we should be always try to be very constructive to encourage them to be able to keep submitting and keep improving. So, of course, if the person is very experienced, and maybe they might take they might take things in a different way than somebody who is basically starting very new or afresh. So I think we should be able to, as Billy is saying, be complimentary, criticize, and then basically summarize it in a way that somebody will read it and then take some positives with the negatives and be able to improve the paper that they are submitting.
I'd like to just add, as people who, as SDers, we want to encourage the dissemination and proliferation of system dynamics. And so if there is a paper which is way off, there's always next year and the year after. We shouldn't just slam the door, keep the window open. There are, when I was reviewing at that time, I was looking at some papers which were really, there are some very good ones, but then there were those that were trying to make an effort. And we said, this would be very good for next year. And if you can submit the simulations with this data or that data, it could become a system dynamics.
I'm sorry to ask, I'm new here. So when I review the article, do I get background of the author, or is that kind of hidden from me? Because sometimes it may create bias or not.
The reviews are completely blind. You do not see the author's name.
Oh, that's good. Okay. And I guess just to add is, yeah, okay, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, and if it happens that you receive a paper that still has the name on it, because sometimes it happens, then just let us know at conference @ but that shouldn't happen. I just wanted to add, think about other questions if you want to, but that the colloquium has a different process for reviewing, and Christine is here as well. You can jump in, Christine. Here in the chat, I'll put in the link for those instructions, but on the web portal, if you go in there through the instructions that we just showed you, there you can put like a 0 for review, and then use these other instructions for the colloquium to actually be assigned other papers for the colloquium review.
Raquel, just in case people didn't completely understand that, the colloquium review process has the colloquium chairs assign reviewers, and it does not respect the number of reviews you ask for. So they're actually 2 separate processes. Even if you put a 0 there and you ask the colloquium reviewers chairs to assign you a review, you will get a review. I think that's all volunteer. Christine, you should correct me on this, but I don't think you ever assign a reviewer who didn't expect to get a review assigned. Is that true?
Yes.
All right.
What Bob said is correct. We have a separate form where we ask your name and what topic you'd like to review and how many submissions you'd like to review. That's separate from the main International System Dynamics Conference. The student organized colloquium are all student or early career researcher papers.
That said, the review forms are identical between the two processes.
Yes.
Perfect, thanks. Do we have any other questions? Otherwise, we'll probably wrap this up a little bit earlier. I didn't see other questions or hands up. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for being part of this, for sharing your experiences and your questions. We hope you'll have a great experience reviewing and giving awesome reviews to people this year. And let us know at conference if you have any other questions. We'll be happy to answer those.
Yes, thank you for being here.